All right. Our good friend I Am Schizo asked a question. He sent me a video. I watched a few minutes of the video. Maybe about 4 or 5 minutes of about a 20-minute video. I get a little annoyed listening to Hebrew, to be honest. So it's not really something I'm relishing to watch. But he asked, how can we... He asked if I would make a video refuting the claims made by the atheist Israelis in the video against the oral traditions, the oral Torah and Rabbinical Judaism. I saw only a few minutes of the video, as I said, and so I can only really comment on what I saw and what I can assume the rest of the video will be discussing. Obviously, correct me if I'm wrong as to what they assert. It seems that a major part of their discussion is really almost Christian in nature. I mean, I wouldn't, it's the same argument that many Christian missionaries make against Judaism, and the question is, where are the sacrifices? Fascinating thing about this video, the point when I pretty much turned off the video, is they were talking about the high priest on the Day of Atonement, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, and things they were mentioning were from the Mishnah. So in a video which is questioning the oral Torah, they are quoting things that they're sourced in the oral Torah. So, for example, when they said that the Kohen Gadol did not sleep the whole day of Yom Kippur. Well, we know that from Mishnah and Yuma, it's not scriptural. So, time and time again, those who claim sola scriptura, that they're only following the Bible and not the rabbinical traditions, not traditions of man. Time and time again, they hearken back to these traditions because, the same thing. I remember, the intellectual dishonesty of Professor Jack Spiro, the Reform rabbi, who, was discussing the question of the authorship of Scripture, which he adopted the leftist view of the documentary hypothesis of higher biblical criticism, is called, and denied, and didn't even mention the traditional view. And then again, hearken back to the Mishnah for how did these books become canonized. And so, which is it? Do you accept the traditions, or do you accept, whatever you want to say? And why? Where do you get to quit picking and choose which parts of the Talmud are worthwhile and which are not? And I can understand the argument that it's not intellectually dishonest would be that the time when these things took place was closer. Meaning when it was declared which books were canonical, which books were matames yadayim, which books rendered the hands unclean. We've discussed that in other videos that, essentially it's a method of protecting the books from being destroyed by declaring them that they render the hands unclean. Why would you accept that? You're going to say, well, that's much closer in history to the time when the Mishnah came about than, the authorship of the various books of Scripture, which is not mentioned in the Mishnah, but is mentioned in the Gemara. But it comes from Brisa, it comes from Mishnaic, Tanaic source. But the problem with that is that there's machlokas, there's dispute in the Mishnah concerning some of the books of Scripture, namely Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon, and also Ezekiel in a different Mishnah. And yet in the Gemara there's very little dispute about who authored the books of Scripture. And so in an intellectually honest way, things that are matters of dispute are more questionable than things that are not matters of dispute. And yet, time and time again we have this. So again, here he's saying the Kohen Gadol didn't sleep all night. Well, where did you know that from? You know that from the Mishnah. Are you going to say, well, it's a historical? That's more historically accurate because it's closer to the time, but it was still hundreds of years later until it was actually written down and codified and so forth. So where do you get, again, how do you justify this as being intellectually honest? And so again, they bring up this question of, well, what do? We don't have the sacrifices. How can we say that we're observant of the Torah if most of the mitzvos of the Torah only apply in the temple? And so therefore, anybody who's telling you that they're Torah observant is a liar, which is ridiculous, and just all things the rabbis made up. Now the thing is that already scripturally we see the prophets, seeming to indicate that there would be a time with no sacrifices, and that the sacrifices would not be the most important thing in the eyes of God. There's an idea that Hosea says that the offerings of lips come in the place of the bulls, meaning that our recitation, whether of prayer or studying the passages about the sacrifices, fulfill the same spiritual goals as bringing sacrifices. So, and that's in the Bible. And the answer we always give to Christians is that, was Daniel a righteous man? How was he a righteous man when he lived 70 years in Babylon with no temple and was not able to offer sacrifices? And so, scripturally, sacrifice is not that important. It's important when it's legally sanctioned to be important, but it's not the be-all and end-all of Judaism, the way that the Sadducees made it. But there's more to this. Again, in the introduction, they said they wanted to prove that the oral law was not from God, and I didn't get to that part of the video. We have to understand, we have to understand what is the oral law. The rabbis saw it as, they connected it to Scripture, where it says, "Lo saser," you should not. It says in Deuteronomy, you should not deviate left or right from that which the judges in that day teach you, which is understood that the main court, which would eventually be known as the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, the court of the 70 elders, as would be identified in Scripture, has legal footing biblically, mosaically, from the Torah, to impose law. And we see that in Scripture. The big example, this week we have Purim. And the Scripture specifically says that these days were enacted just like the laws of the fasts. And so too we have the laws of the fasts in Scripture. Zechariah mentions the 4 fasts. And these are the same fasts that we observe today They're mentioned in Scripture. And they are not Mosaic in origin, but they are Mosaic in authority. Meaning, even though they obviously historically come later than Moses, it was God said to Moses, it's in Deuteronomy, the authority that the rabbis have to impose such laws, to enact such laws. And it's not an abrogation in any way of the Torah. It is what the Torah commands us. That there is, as long, and the main thing though is that when it says about Tosef, you're not allowed to add to the Torah, you're not allowed to subtract from the Torah. What it means is, within the realm, we can't claim something that's rabbinical is biblical and so forth. But then they're going to ask, so how you're subtracting from the Torah? Look at all the mitzvos that we're losing because we don't have a temple. And again, it's not subtracting from the Torah. Those mitzvos remain in place as valid for when the temple is rebuilt or restored, whether it falls down from heaven, whatever it is. It's still counted among the 613 mitzvos, but it's not currently practiced because the law is right now we don't practice it. And that's what the Bible gives us. We'll go a little bit further. The question, though, is where do we derive these ideas? So there certainly is, according to Rishonim, different views about what it means that that the oral Torah was given at Sinai. Many Rishonim understand it, meaning great medieval rabbinical authorities understand that what was actually given at Sinai were the 13 principles that are in the Bryce of Rabbi Shmuel, that we say liturgically every morning. That there are 13 principles of how to study Scripture, and that those were given at Sinai, and that by virtue of using those techniques to interpret Scripture, we therefore, meaning that the potential energy was there in order that the interpretation of Scripture could be understood, and that there are aspects of interpretation that are understood to be Torah, some of which are understood to be halacha l'Moshe Sinai. There are very few of those, but meaning that these were actually given at Sinai in some sense, or meaning that they were not derived by virtue of interpretation, but rather by virtue of tradition. And then other aspects, the rabbis would argue when the temple stood, when the Sanhedrin existed, and they would discuss, how are we going to paskin on this? How are we going to rule on these questions? And we have that historically, that it was in the time of David that they decided that a woman from Moab would be accepted, and they made their biblical arguments according to that, and that's why David was acceptable as a king with a Moabite ancestor, because it was a female ancestor, and so the rabbis admit that through history, the laws, the interpretations of the laws, they developed the way they did. The question is, though, again, we have a very famous Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Kol man da'asid Talmud Vasik l'chadesh, karnitna l'Moshe Messinai. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said that whoever a pious scholar would bring about as a novel idea in Jewish law was already given to Moses at Sinai, not only in Jewish law, but in Jewish thought and so forth. So again, the question is, was it literally given? Was there a chvez, in the tablets of the Ten Commandments, did you have some kind of a computer baseboard? I don't know what it's called, some kind of computer chip that had all this information there? It's possible. Obviously, if we could have something like that, God could give something even much higher level to Moses. So that type of thing is possible. But the way it's generally understood is, again, it's in the question of the potential was given at Sinai, and it was actualized through history, in a certain sense, almost in the way that other religions speak about progressive revelation, that new things are revealed through history. That's certainly an idea that you find in some aspects of Hasidic thought, particularly the Ishbitzer school taught this. The Beis Yaakov, particularly, the son of the Meir Shiloach, writes about this extensively, that basically that God basically talks to or through, not in the prophetic sense, not in the sense of the clear word, but whatever the halacha is, you get a psak halacha from a posek, that's God's will, because of divine providence, if not prophecy. And as we say, chacham adif minavi, that a sage is greater than a prophet. Common sense is greater than prophecy, because it's still guided by the hand of God. So there certainly, I would say, either way is totally kosher from an Orthodox sense, as long as we believe in the 13 principles of faith, like Maimonides taught, as long as we follow halacha, at the very least, to what the sages paskined, with the Sanhedrin paskined. That's what's binding on all Klal Yisrael. Other things are minhagim, that are local. Differences between Sfardim and Ashkenazim, obviously, and questions with modern technology and things. These things are not necessarily what's binding on all the Klal Yisrael. But the thing is, for a particular community to follow their rabbis, and so, for example, not to use electricity on Shabbos. The vast majority of Orthodox rabbis today say that it's forbidden for whatever reason it is. And so in the belief in divine providence, the providence that we have is that it's, for some reason, it's forbidden, whether it's an actual biblical prohibition, whether it's a rabbinical prohibition, whether it's a minhag uvdin dechol. For one of these reasons, it's something we shouldn't do. Is it necessarily something you'd bring a korban chatas or get skila for? No. Maybe yes. According to Chazon Ish, yes. According to Shlomo Zalman, no. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim, we could say colloquially, doesn't really mean halachically, elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim, even halachically, it was talking about Chazal, talking about the Tanoim. But, colloquially, we still have these ideas. But the thing is, most agree that it's not something you do, whether or not, whatever the reason is, and if you, and that's comes from a certain level of hashgacha pratis, of divine providence, more than a certain level. I mean, if there's hashgacha pratis in everything in life, so obviously there's hashgacha pratis in halacha, in psak halacha, guiding the tzaddikim, guiding das Torah. It doesn't mean it's infallible, and it doesn't mean it's universal. I would say that the hashgacha pratis is included with a psak for this community and a psak for that community. Can I prove these things? No. But, historically, do we have to say that everything we do today is exactly the way it was done in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu? No. But certainly things that we say there, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, like Nisuch HaMayim, like Tefillin, these types of things, yes, they're the same pretty much. I mean, Nisuch HaMayim we don't have today. But, but that shows that even in the time when the temple stood, the differences between the rabbinical Jews and the solo scriptura Jews on questions like this. So, to the point where the rabbinical Jews, they said, when they used, say, Ki Yisrael, like a Jew, the tzedukim is the whole question of benos tzedukim and so forth. Are they considered as a Jew or not? And usually not. You know, I mean, but the unity of Klal Yisrael is the halacha of the Sanhedrin. Now, obviously, there are going to be different piskei halacha that come after that, but that's the point where the whole Klal Yisrael agrees. So no, you don't have to abstain from kitnios on Pesach if you don't have a clear minhag. But is it a pious thing to do? I think it is. I know some people feel that it's more pious not to be keeping kitnios. But for me, I feel it's pious to keep kitnios and to keep gebrocks and these things if that's the minhag in your community, and not to think you're better than the ones who don't, and not to and the same thing, the ones who don't, not to think they're better than the ones that do. We can have unity without, maybe we don't have to eat at the same table to have unity. Unity is something much more deep, much deeper than these external, expressions. And so too, the idea of what was given at Sinai, it's not just did Yaakov Avinu, tie his tzitzis exactly. Don't get tied up about these things. And also, you have to understand the difference between halacha and agadata. Halacha is what we got from the Sanhedrin, what we have to follow, how we have to live. Every saying is saying like Amr Rishub and Levi called Mandas Talmud Vasik Lachadish Kvarnit Termisin. That's agadata. That's not halacha. There's a deep philosophical lesson there, not necessarily meant to be taken literally. And that's, again, it's ironic that this YouTube channel that my friend I am Schizo sent is called Logos Media, and I talk all the time about logos and mythos, and it's like what's her name? Karen Armstrong says, based on Jung, that you can't mistake mythos for logos. Judaism always made a difference between halacha and agadata. Halacha is nomos, is logos, and agadata is mythos. And mythos is an informant of truth in a deep philosophical way, not necessarily in a practical way. And halacha is our practical guide to life. And there has to be the balance between the two. And you can't mistake one for another. You can't make the mistake the Lubavitchers make, thinking that they hear the Medrash that how tall Oig Melech HaBashan was 1,000 feet tall, and Moshe Rabbeinu was 300 feet tall, and this, that, and he came up to the ankle of Oig Melech HaBashan, this and that. No, that's not literally true. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit what the Medrash says. The point of that Medrash is to teach deep philosophical lessons. Look in the Vilner Gaon, look in the Chidushei Agadis, Maharsha. Look in the Ben Ish Chai, the what's the name of the Sefer? The Ben Yoyada. Look in the Chassidish Sfarim. They explain this as deep philosophical lessons, not history. Are you stupid? You think Moshe Rabbeinu was 300 feet tall? Literally? No, I mean spiritually he was great, obviously. And that there was a certain greatness that Oig Melech HaBashan had, spiritually. It doesn't mean literally that he was the size of Godzilla. Even the Godzilla movies, they don't agree how tall Godzilla was. These are the types of things you've got to have in mind. There's a difference between halacha and agadata. There are deep spiritual lessons, philosophical lessons. They're not meant to be taken literally, and it's foolish to do so. And that's why people lose their faith, because they things that are meant to be taken figuratively to teach a deep lesson, they're taught that it's literal, and then they say that's stupid, and then they lose their faith. And the thing is, to take it literally is stupid, and it's heretical, and it's not Yiddishkeit. Maybe certain parts of it are literal. But there's certain people who feel like there's nothing historical in the Gadata. Everything is meant to be teaching a deeper lesson. And there are those who say that we don't even need to pay attention to it at all. And there's room for that, and it's, in a certain sense, it's totally kosher. I would say as long as you believe in the Yud Gimel Ikrim and you keep the halacha, or you believe in the necessity to keep halacha, and you try your best when it's feasible, and you do tshuva when you do something wrong. And that's what is important. Not to believe that Moshe Rabbeinu was 300 feet tall. That's silly. To believe that spiritually he was a giant. Of course. He was the greatest prophet we ever had. But not to turn things that are meant to be. It cheapens the holiness of the Agadata, which contain and the Lubavitcher should know this. That Tanya says that the Sodos HaTorah are hidden in the Agadata. Sodos HaTorah doesn't mean literal. It means poetic, figurative, philosophical lessons, spiritual lessons, not literal history. Don't be a fool. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you later.